G'day YouTube, Warble's on a lot. It's Sunday morning, it's nearly 10 o'clock, and that means, look at that, it's obviously time for first dog on the moon. So, Mr. Whitetail has showed up for duty to listen to first dog on the moon, and we have our camera rig of the day, and Fruit Loop has also showed up to listen to first dog on the moon's take this Sunday morning.
Hello, Patriots. Welcome to First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living. I'm Walkley Award-winning cartoonist, First Dog on the Moon. This week, we're so far up the lower intestine of election 2013, we can almost brush its teeth. Can you see the end in sight? Can you feel it? We're in the eye of the storm, comrades, the eye of the tiger once more. Unto the breach, dear friends. Dig deep, Australia, only 3 weeks to go. But until then, it's all gaffes and costings and idiot grins, firm handshakes and high-vis vests. We are a nation stuffed full of wisdom, suppositories and sex appeal. I say, stick them all in a chaff bag and throw them into Alan Jones. I can't take one more confected national emergency, one more whinge about the debt crisis we aren't having, one more catastrophic border security incident while Scott Morrison smiles and mumbles in his sleep about how it is that the more votes that come, the better. Stick me in a cardboard box and mail me to Quentin Bryce. I've known deep-fried eggplant with more compassion than any of these petulant robots. And at the beginning, we all thought it might be nice to have a campaign of ideas. Be careful what you wish for, you muppets. We got a campaign of ideas after all. And what ideas they are. Dreadful ideas. Ghastly, ruinous ideas, cooked up by ghastly, ruinous men and women. Ideas fished out of the dark, dusty, cold crawl spaces their souls once cowered in before they were clubbed to death by expedients. Oh, we're having a campaign of ideas, children. Unspeakable ideas, all greasy with menace. Ideas that leave a slippery, cruel trail as they're dragged, squealing and writhing into the light, snapping their poisonous jaws and squirming as they're thrust into the face of a stupefied, indifferent electorate. Look at these ideas. Look at these wonderful, magical ideas. The clowns in their high-vis vests and blue ties are grinning and wheedling, waving their ideas about, sneering and capering with blood on their hands and coal dust in their hearts. Here's an idea. Let's take all the asylum seekers already in the country. No, not all of them, only the brown ones that came by boat, their lives ruined by circumstance. Let's take away their hope and break their hearts, then put these people to work because you know it makes you free. Let's put them down the reverse carbon mines. They can cart the dreadful stuff underground, although how it can be so bad when it's invisible, I don't know, but these science types all seem to be in a flap about it. We can fix the science and the boats and the debt. Don't worry how we'll pay for it, just trust us. Just trust us. Don't worry your little head about it, Australia. We won't bore you with costings. We'll bore you instead by bleating about debt and deficits and insisting we'll do it better. You don't need to know how. It's enough that we're not them. Just trust us. Just trust us. We're not them and they're not us, they say. But the nation begs to differ. Is this the Australia we want to live in? Apparently. Well, good luck with it. Some of you are really going to need it. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine. This has been First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living. I'm First Dog on the Moon.
Well, there you go. For a hound on the moon, that fella's got a pretty good telescope. Must be listening to the radio too. So, we've got an election campaign coming up. And Tony Abbott has been championing his own toughness against asylum seekers and refugees. He's been calling them illegal immigrants. ever since back when he was a minister under the Howard government. Stop the boats, stop the boats, stop the boats. He reckons that his government would do a better job than any Labor government just because Conservatives do shit better. Look at Rupert Murdoch. He's up against Kevin Rudd, and Kevin Rudd is a lot more popular than Julia Gillard was, because Julia Gillard was probably installed with the expectation that she'd lose to Tony Abbott and steer Labor through its wilderness years, and then Kevin Rudd could come back. But that didn't work because she won. And then she had to be deposed because by the time she was ready for standing an election on the background of backflipping on carbon tax, she said in order to win the election, she said they wouldn't have a carbon tax. And then she had a bloody carbon tax. Not a very good one, not a very big one, not a very effective one. Started out at $15 a tonne when I think $150 a tonne is a better price to make people pay for emitting carbon dioxide. You burn a litre of petrol or diesel or gas and it turns into 2.5 kilograms. So that would mean an extra 45 cents a litre at the Bowser to pay a $150 a tonne cost on emitting carbon dioxide. I can't see that that would actually cripple the economy because we've had fuel at $2 a litre and it's $1.60 at the moment. The economy doesn't die when you add 40 cents to the price of a litre of petrol. But it would put a lot of people out of work. All the people who feel like living in one town and then driving a car towing a caravan to the next town so they can shampoo a pussycat's toenails or clip a French poodle into exotic shapes. Those sort of people, yeah, they'll be on the dole. But all of the people whose jobs actually are functionally a matter of great import to society, they'll just pass their costs along, and people can't go without something to eat, something to wear, a little bit of electricity. They'll pay the tax, and thus the revenue will be raised to cope with the people who are being economically disjointed by the change to a low carbon emission economy. But none of the politicians want to say that except the Greens. And the Greens haven't even really got the guts to say that. You know, the Greens want us to sort of move on up to $25 a tonne. Well, I say $150 a tonne would actually make a difference. Of course, it means the price of electricity would fucking skyrocket, you know, because you burn a tonne of coal and you probably get 3 or 5 tonnes of carbon dioxide coming off it, because it's just about solid carbon. It's what it is. It's carbon. It's not a lot of hydrogen in the coal. So, not compared to the carbon content of it, vis-a-vis, say, kerosene or heating oil. So you've got the people who want to be voted in by the shareholders and the executive classes, that's the Liberal Party. You've got the people who want to be voted in by the miners, the loggers and the farmers, that's the National Party. You've got the people who want to be voted in by the blue-collar workers, that's the Labor Party. They are all deeply uninterested in anything that's going to increase the short-term cost of fuel to their businesses that they all fixate on and make their lives revolve around. We've got Tony Abbott so terrified by the prospect of the Greens being a party that he wants to preference the Labor Party, the Liberal Party's the traditional congenital arch enemies, the wicked evil socialist left-wing communistic union-backed Labor Party. Ooh, Reds under the beds, boo-hoo, Senator Tailgunner Joe McCarthy. Abbott's decided to preference the Labor Party in front of the Greens. And there's an awful lot of people who used to be Labor voters who just can't stomach this new fucking concentration camps in Papua New Guinea and Manus Island and Nauru method of frightening people off the idea of jumping on a boat somewhere in Asia or Africa and coming to Australia and starting a whole new life because the Europeans and the industrialised Americans have gone and fucking made a mess of wherever they used to live, competing for cheap resources and destabilising the local government and tribal societies. So the idea is Australia's got to be terrified of boat people, and the Liberals, the Nationals, the Labor Party are competing with each other, and I've got to say it, Kevin Rudd has completely successfully leapfrogged the Liberal Party in terms of fascist tendencies towards boat people. If you arrive on Australia's coast in a boat, unless you've got all your passport stamped, and it was a cruise liner coming from wherever cruise liners depart from, you will never be allowed to live in Australia, even if you are a refugee. Australia is just, we like to be picky about who comes here, and we don't like people from war-torn countries where our soldiers have been running around making a mess. We don't like people from anywhere else where there's been a mess made. Festung Australia. So what the Greens have said is, if you're fed up, vote Green. The Greens have been right on everything that mattered for the last 50 or 60 years. I can remember being a teenager and reading that scientists were concerned about carbon dioxide emissions because they'd known for 100 bloody years that if we kept on going, we were going to change the gas mix of the atmosphere and it was going to cause the whole thing to warm up. Well, we're doing it. We've done a really wild job of it. And the politicians who represent the people who live in the towns and the cities don't want to pay attention to it. They think they can vote climate change out of existence. Well, really you can't. Even if you voted to stop all carbon emissions tomorrow, it still wouldn't change the track that we're on. Anthropogenic global warming is in the pipeline. But what that means is that you can't put any stock in pure extrapolation of previous figures. You can't say, tourism increased by X percentage per decade for the previous 4 decades right up until now, so therefore tourism is going to increase by X percent per decade, and therefore thus and because we need to build whole new roads and another airport with a big motel beside it. That was all before the global financial crisis. It was all before peak oil, peak coal, peak phosphorus, peak tin, peak copper, peak timber, peak fish. There is nowhere for an industrial economy to harvest an environmental surplus. There is no demand. You can get a better return on your money by leaving it in a savings account than you can by buying a share and investing it in anything, because the chances are you'll buy a share and the share value will go down, and meanwhile there won't be a dividend because there's no profit to be made because the company's disappearing up its own arsehole. So, that's what's actually going on. The world economy is disappearing up its own arsehole, and you've got these political clowns telling you that they're going to somehow steer us back to economic growth and a financial surplus in the economy. They're going to export more than they import. And there's 150 or so countries, 270, however many are in or out of the United Nations, all on the surface of one mud ball, and they all want to export more than they import. Where are they going to export their surplus? Are they going to export it to Mars, are they? That'll probably be a good answer, because Mars is the fucking traditional god of war for the culture that's been in command of raping the planet, really. Since Romulus and Remus were orphaned when the slave traders from Greece captured their parents and left them for the fucking dingoes to raise, or wolves, wolves, that was it. They didn't have dingoes in Europe then. Even then, a dingo's not a wild dog, a dingo's a camp dog. The Warrigal wolves was what raised Romulus and Remus. They grew up without a culture, so they just smashed and busted and fucked everything that they could see. So they did that to Europe, didn't they? And after they overgrew their environmental capacity, they collapsed. They had a dark age. And what brought Europe out of the dark age? It was the invention of a thing called a proprietary limited company. So you could buy a share of the profits, but if you destroyed somebody else's lifestyle in the proceeds, they couldn't come after you for your house and your money and your assets for the damage you'd done to them. A proprietary limited company. Buy a share of the profits and have no liability for any of the fucking damage you've done. That's what made the Renaissance possible, and that's what has trashed the earth. To enrich the shareholders, to pay a dividend, to be seen to be growing so that the share price will go up. The economists have trashed the world. They've changed the friggin' reflecting power of planet Earth. Shit, back in the 1970s they measured it from a satellite and it was 39% of the light that hit planet Earth bounced off. Albedo 0.39. I used to collect instrumental synthetic music. It was either John Mikel Jarre or Vangelis has an album called Albedo 0.39. The whole 90-minute long playing record is devoted to the idea that 39% of the light that hits planet Earth bounces off. 20 years after that, I was married to an astronomy student. She handed me an essay to proofread. I got to the figure Earth's albedo is 35% and I chipped her on it, and now she pulled out new research. In 20 years we've gone from 39% to 35%. That was in the early 1990s. It's down around 31% now, and it's dropping as we're melting the North Polar ice cap and the South Polar ice cap and the Greenland ice cap, as well as cutting down all the trees and exposing the bare dirt where there used to be shiny leaf tops. We've changed the amount of sunlight that bounces off the Earth by about 8% just in the past 35 years that I've been paying attention. We've changed the temperature and the moisture content of the atmosphere by 5% just in the last 30 years. And the politicians don't want to do anything about anthropogenic global warming because they can't be bothered, because it's politically unsaleable in the suburbs. So they're just going to wait for the extreme weather events to lift the fucking roofs off the suburbs, bust all their roads, smash all their power grids, leave them in a condition where they can't live because they can't be bothered facing reality. These are the people who light fires to make shit go cold. They have coal-fired electric refrigerators to make their beer and food stay cold. When it's a really stinking hot day, they go down to the shop and they buy a bloody air conditioner and plug that into the coal-fired power station because that'll mean that life's good in their living room. And they sit down there and they work out how they can vote so that they get the most money for themselves, and they don't give a shit about 60 to 85% of the people in jail being in there for drug-related offences. They don't care about cuts to education as long as it gives them a fringe benefit here or a bloody payback on their tax there. Oh, geez, our grandchildren's generation are going to fucking hate us when they look back at us in the history book. They are going to hate our guts. So, one of the things that I'm proud of is that I haven't done much damage. Instead of 30 tonnes of carbon a year like your average Australian puts out, I only fart 9 tonnes. And over half of what I fart is firewood, renewable, bushfire hazard fuel reduction. Ciao.